The third point is about allowing for conflict in a relationship. You see, one of the misunderstandings about healthy relationships is that those relationships don't have conflict. They don't fight. The gold standard is a conflict-free relationship. And that's a serious misunderstanding. John Gottman has done a lot of work in this area. One of the things that he showed was that there is no one right relationship, and that also means that different relationships look differently from outside or from the inside. Some relationships thrive and are very quiet. Some relationships thrive and are extremely volatile. Both can succeed. There is no one right form of relationship, and there are numerous permutations and variations on this. But while there is no one right relationship, one thing that Gottman has found is that in all those relationships, whether they're volatile or very peaceful and quiet or somewhere in between, they all have conflicts. And on average, and this is an average because it can be 10-1, it can also be 3-1. But on average, they have one conflict for each 5 positive interactions. Now, that doesn't mean now going home and telling your partner, we've already had 7 good interactions, let's fight. Certainly not that. But that is what he has seen when he studied hundreds and thousands of thriving couples. That was more or less the average of conflict per positive interaction. This statistic, by the way, helped me a lot because whenever Tommy and I used to fight, and yes, we do fight at times, I used to say, "Oh, what's wrong?" Versus now, it's okay, it's natural. Let's see how we can resolve it, what we can learn from it, how we can grow from it. That doesn't mean I enjoy or that we seek conflict. It's awful and sometimes it hurts very deeply. But at the same time, to understand it's natural. And just like we give ourselves the permission to be human on an individual level, it's important that we give our relationship the permission to be human and humane. People who have that 5-1 ratio, again, more or less, usually have the thriving relationship. People who have a lot less than 1-5 ratio, meaning 100-1, the relationship in the long term does not thrive, nor do people who have many more conflicts than positive interactions. So neither extremes are good. The importance of conflict is that it immunizes. Let's look at the natural or physiological level of immunity. What would happen to a person was just born and put into an oxygen tank, which is sterilized and not taken out of that sterilized oxygen tank? What will happen if, say, after 2 years or 3 years or 10 years, that baby, now no longer a baby, is taken out of that perfect surrounding into the real world? That person is very likely to get ill, very likely to get seriously ill. Why? Because it's not healthy to be in a sterilized environment on the physiological level. Because every time you get ill or every time you're exposed to pollutions or bacteria, your body actually strengthens. The same in a relationship. If you're not exposed to conflict in a relationship, over time, the relationship will not strengthen. It will be weak. It will be unable to sustain the inevitable conflict that will arise. So conflict immunizes. It's important. And we'll talk about in what ways or what the conflict looks like, because not every conflict is healthy. The key that Gottman talks about is not to take away or eliminate the negative, but rather to accentuate, to strengthen the positive. So in relationships that don't thrive, where there's too much fighting, relationships that are here, just accentuate the positive. If you're here and there are no conflicts, well, that means maybe that we're suppressing things, emotions, disagreements. In other words, we're not about being known, and we need to move on and reveal ourselves, open up, and share. Here are some ways of accentuating the positive. So you remember in the book in Happier, I talk about happiness boosters. These are mini activities. Could be anywhere from a minute to 3 hours of doing things that are both meaningful and pleasurable to us. So just like we have happiness boosters that can have a trickle effect for the rest of our lives, we can also have love boosters. There's a story about Albert Einstein and Ludwig van der Rohe. Ludwig van der Rohe was one of the founders of quantum physics. And when Ludwig van der Rohe wrote Einstein a letter saying to him, I want to interest you in this new fascinating field of quantum physics. I want your support. Einstein was, a big shot at the time. Einstein responded with a letter, and in the letter said to Ludwig van der Rohe, I'm not interested in quantum physics. What I'm interested in I'm not interested in the details. What I am interested in is what God thought about when He created the world. I'm not interested in the details. I'm interested in what God thought about when He created the world. To which Ludwig van der Rohe wrote back saying, God is in the details. The same with love. Love is in the details. Love is not in that 1 week or 2 months around the world cruise. Love is not in that 5-carat diamond ring. Yes, these things are wonderful. They certainly lead to a spike in well-being, sometimes to a spike in love. But they're not what sustains a happy relationship. What sustains a happy relationship are the details, the little things, the day-to-day rituals, the touch, the gaze, the meal together. Mini love boosters also sustain. I got this idea from Peter Frankel, who is from the Ackerman Family Center in New York. And what he talks about are 60 seconds pleasure points throughout the day. Whether it's a passionate kiss, whether it's just a hug where you just hold one another, whether it's just sending a text message to your partner saying how much you love them and miss them. The little things. And what they found was that these little things made the big difference. Again, yes, the big things also make a difference, and I'm not belittling them. But that just leads to a spark. To sustain happiness, it takes time, and it takes work. It takes commitment. A relationship is made extraordinary by focusing on these details, on these day-to-day activities. And how we do that, we demonstrate interest by asking, so, how was your day, sweetheart? Or, tell me more about what you have just done. Or, what have you been thinking? Or, you look a little bit down. Anything I can do? Demonstrate interest. Create love maps. Get to know the other person. What they like, what they don't like, and how they like it. Again, the little things, such as touching, such as smiling, such as flowers, such as remembering the important dates, men. Today it's much easier, we have the computer reminding us. Have many reminders. Talking from personal experience. Pay compliments. Pay compliments to your partner. Don't take for granted. Remember the word appreciate. 2 meanings. To pay a compliment to someone, oh, you look wonderful. Oh, this was so great. Thank you so much for doing. Thank you for thinking of me. Paying compliments, appreciating, makes the good appreciate. And when we don't appreciate, when we don't pay compliments, the good depreciates. Mark Twain, I can live for 2 months on a good compliment. Don't take him literally, though. Let me share with you a story. This is my father-in-law and his wife. My father-in-law is a graduate of Harvard Law School, very bright, very smart, and married to, her name is Ami, married to a lovely woman, Rachel, Rachel. And they went on a date. And Rachel was wearing a beautiful, beautiful dress. And they walked into the party and they spent the whole night and they saw many people. It was a lovely evening. And at the end of the evening, they went back home and Rachel asked Ami, she said, Ami, the whole night I've been getting compliments about how wonderful I look, how ravishing the dress is, how radiant I look. I got it from everyone except from you. Now remember, Ami is a Harvard Law School graduate, very smart, very quick on his feet, one of the leading lawyers in Israel. So he said, Rachel, do you remember when a couple of months ago I told you how beautiful, how gorgeous you were? And she said, yes, of course I remember. He said, well, until further notice, you're beautiful. Now, that almost worked. The problem is that Rachel is also a lawyer. Very bright, very successful. And she said to him, Ami, sweetheart, until further notice, you're on the couch. So, don't wait to be asked to give compliments. Give it. It's free. And yet, though it's free, in the ultimate currency, it is invaluable. Invaluable because we get so much out of it, the giver as well as the receiver. That the number one predictor of therapeutic relationships, the number one predictor of the success of a therapy, of a psychologist or a social worker or a psychiatrist, is empathy. How well you're able to understand, to empathize, to identify with your client. It's no different in romantic relationships. Do I really listen to my partner? Do I really look at my partner? Do I demonstrate genuine interest in what my partner is doing, feeling, and how they are? Do I really, really want to get to know them? Because if we don't have that, it is very difficult to sustain a long-term, thriving relationship. And finally, sex is important for long-term, thriving relationship. It does not have to come before marriage. It does not have to come before there is a lifelong commitment, marriage or other. It can, it often does in our world. And either way is fine, either choice. However, for the long-term success of the relationship, it is also important to have the physical aspect. It's very rare, it exists, but it's very rare to have a romantic relationship without the physical component. So that's one of the distinguishing characteristics between that and a deep friendship, for example. Love at its, or rather sex at its highest, is love made concrete. Love made concrete. That is why we talk about making love. It's the concretization of that emotion, of that abstract notion. The important thing here is, as in every other area of the relationship, healthy communication. Because very often we reveal ourselves, we share of ourselves in the bedroom more than in any other place, whether it's physically or emotionally or cognitively. That's where we open up. That's when we are literally, metaphorically naked. And communication is important because very often there are differences in expectations. And there is no one right prescription here. Okay, sex 5 times a week, the best relationships, 3 not bad, 1 okay. No, there are fantastic relationships where it's, once a day or twice a month, or once a week. There are wonderful relationships whether it's every day 3 times. There is no one right prescription. I don't know what I said, it was funny, but I'll have to watch it after because I'm sure Freud is watching now. And the important thing is to communicate, because it is a source of conflict. It is a potential source of conflict. It doesn't have to be. Let me show you a quick video, just to get the attention off me for a minute, from Woody Allen.
That day in Brooklyn was the last day I remember really having a good time.
We never have any laughs anymore is the problem.
I've been moody and dissatisfied.
How often do you sleep together?
Do you have sex often?
Hardly ever, maybe 3 times a week.
Constantly. I'd say 3 times a week. Like the other night, Albie wanted to have sex.
She would not sleep with me the other night, you know?
Man, I don't know. I mean, 6 months ago, I would have done it. I would have done it. Just
incredible.
please.
I tried everything, you know. I put on soft music and my red light bulb.
But the thing is, I mean, since our discussions here, I feel I have a right to my own feelings. I think you would have been happy because I really asserted myself.
The incredible thing about it is I'm paying for her analysis, and she's making progress, and I'm getting screwed.
I don't know, though. I mean, I feel so guilty because Albie is paying for it. So, so I do feel guilty if I don't go to bed with him. But if I do go to bed with him, it's like I'm going against my own
feelings. She's making progress, and I'm not making
I don't know.
progress.
I can't win.
And her progress is
Sometimes I think
progress.
Sometimes I think I should just live with a woman.
So hardly ever 3 times a week, constantly 3 times a week. Again, different perceptions. Communication is important. Not any conflict is good. There is positive as well as negative conflict. Helpful research in this area comes actually from organizational behavior. Specifically, what research in organizational behavior shows is that healthy intergroup or intra-group conflict is cognitive conflict rather than affective conflict. Cognitive conflict is about focusing on the person's behavior or thoughts and ideas and challenging those. Unhealthy conflict is focusing on the person, on their emotions, on who they are. And when I attack someone for who they are, the person, their emotion, that is not healthy. Not for a group, not for couples. At the same time, I can disagree, we can have conflict when we focus on the ideas, the thoughts, and the behavior. Let me show you an example. Here is an example of focusing on the person. You are so inconsiderate. This is not the behavior, this is the person. Focusing on the behavior. Do you mind putting down the toilet seat when you're done? It may be as a result of the same thing. You didn't put the toilet seat down. One response, you're so inconsiderate, that's the person, versus the behavior. Another example. You're such a slob. You promised to throw away the garbage. I can't trust you. That is an attack on the person. Yeah, I think so. Versus, it upsets me to return to a dirty home after we agreed that you would throw away the garbage. Same event, very different approach, very different results to these criticisms. In addition to challenging behavior rather than person, it is important to avoid hostility, insult, and contempt. John Gottman talks about this a lot in his research, and he says that he can predict divorce with 94% accuracy, as I mentioned last time, unheard of in the social sciences. And he can do it based on whether he sees in the disagreements, in the conflicts, and he asks the partners to describe their conflicts, and very often they start fighting as he observes them. When there is hostility, when there is contempt, very often that is a bad sign. Doesn't always lead to divorce, certainly not, but it's a bad sign. It's a bad sign in terms of the long-term likelihood of success, but it's also a bad sign in terms of the current enjoyment of the relationship. So it's important to keep these insults away, to focus on the person, to validate the person, to appreciate the person, and then to disagree with the behavior or with the ideas and the thinking. The key is to keep these disputes private. Meaning, it is difficult enough to fight in a relationship. It is extraordinarily difficult when embarrassment is also associated with it. So couples who shout at one another when they're with others, or when they show contempt when other friends are there, that is extremely destructive, extremely unhelpful. So to keep these intimate moments that can potentially lead to growth private. Finally, we can learn a lot from conflicts in gay couples. As I mentioned last time, John Gottman has studied gay couples a great deal, and one of the interesting things that he found was that they fight differently. Now, the interesting thing here, it would not have been interesting if that was just between women. The interesting thing is that he found it also between men, because women generally are better at fights than men. And there is actually a physiological reason for it. There's a physiological reason, because men, when they're attacked, for example, or when they feel attacked or threatened or disapproved of, actually have a much more powerful physiological response to it. Which is why men are more likely, for example, to switch off. It's not just because they're men. It's because there are real physiological differences there. Where a woman, for example, who is criticized will feel it. No one enjoys it. But a man, again, these are all averages. It doesn't mean all men or all women. But on average, men will feel it in a much more intense way, and then will try to protect themselves. And one of the ways of protecting ourselves is by switching off, avoiding rather than coping. Whereas women are much more comfortable. Even on the physiological level, I'm not talking about the interpretation of that physiology, but on the physiological level, they are much more comfortable handling and dealing with this dis-ease or discomfort of an argument. So the first thing is to know it, whether you're a man and you understand, well, I shouldn't switch off, I know I'm uncomfortable, it's part of my nature, accept it, and then you can cope rather than avoid. Or with women, to have more empathy and understand that their partner's experience is not the same as their experience. But here's the interesting thing. In gay couples, men or women, we see an enhanced, a better ability to disagree. For example, how do they do it? First thing, more positive, more humor, more affection, more touching, whether it's the men or the women. And that helps to dissolve, to relax some of the tension that exists. Again, both for men and for women couples. The negativity is less often taken personally. So even if there is a serious disagreement, well, I understand that this is part of growth. This is important to keep in mind. That yes, we may not be enjoying ourselves now and it's a serious fight, but what can I learn from it? What are we going to learn? How are we going to grow? Because I understand that conflict is a natural, inevitable, important part of a relationship. Gay couples do it more. No reason why heterosexual couples can't do it more. Simply by reminding. And finally, there's more attention to the other side, to calm down, to understand, to be empathic, whether it's men or women, to be empathic and understand and soothe. And very often just, in the middle of a conflict, saying something like, I'm sorry, or just a hug, or, it hurts me, and I love you so much. Just ways of soothing, alleviating some of the pressure in the conflict, because conflicts are not easy. Certainly not easy for gay couples either. It's just being able to manage a conflict when it occurs. Does not need to be peculiar to same-sex relationships. We know the golden rule, do not do unto others what you would not have done unto yourself. We talked about the platinum rule, do not do unto yourself what you would not do unto others, when we talked about perfectionism and the permission to be human. So here is the titanium rule. Do not do unto those close to you what you would not have done unto others who are not so close to you. How often in the street or when you've just met someone do you shout at them or find other ways of showing contempt or insult? Being aggressive or passively aggressive? How many times do you do that to strangers? I mean, they really would have had to do a terrible, awful thing for you to express contempt or hostility or anger toward them. And yet, on average, we do it so much more often. Again, not always, not everyone, but so many people do it so often with people close to them, whether it's family members, whether it's very close friends, whether it's romantic partners. No justification for that. Yes, it is also because we're more intimate with them, because we feel more comfortable with them. But why? Why treat others better than we treat the people we love most? Or why treat the people we love most worse than we would treat others? There is no justification. There can be conflict, there will be conflict, and it is important. The question is, how do you keep it on the cognitive, behavioral level rather than the affective, emotional contempt level? And that can make all the difference. Essentially what we're talking about here when it comes to romantic relationship is cultivating a deep, meaningful friendship. John Gottman: at the heart of my program is the simple truth that happy marriages are based on a deep friendship. By this I mean a mutual respect for and enjoyment of each other's company. These couples tend to know each other intimately. They are well versed in each other's likes, dislikes, personality, quirks, hopes, and dreams. They have an abiding regard for each other and express this fondness not just in the big ways, but in the little ways, day in and day out. Love is in the details. It's about knowing the little things, the big things. It is about sharing and being known. That's what a healthy relationship is. And that's how you can sustain passion in a relationship over years. And that's how you can continue to enjoy a passionate sexual relationship. Even though physiologically, maybe initially, the natural inclination would be toward novelty, toward the exotic is erotic. It doesn't have to be that way. It can be that way as well, and that's natural, and that can be part of the fantasies that you share. But ultimately, for the long-term relationship, passionate relationship, to be known rather than to be validated. I want to just go back quickly and elaborate on something that I didn't last time about the conflict or conflicts within a relationship. I think the most important article that I read about relationships in general was the article on friendship by Ralph Waldo Emerson, published in 1841. And what Emerson writes about is his ideal friend. Let me quote him. He says, "In a friend, what I'm looking for is not a mush of concessions, a person who will agree with everything that I say. Rather, what I'm looking for is a beautiful enemy, a person who will challenge me, who will push me, who will help me in my apprenticeship to the truth." A beautiful enemy. What a beautiful phrase. A conflict-free relationship is where there are no beautiful enemies. A beautiful enemy is a person who loves us, who cares about us enough to challenge us, enough to disagree. And ask yourself, what kind of friend, what kind of romantic partner would you like? A yes man or woman? Or a person who will be honest, who will have high levels of integrity? What is the ideal friend? What is the ideal partner? You know, it's interesting, this whole idea of a beautiful enemy goes way back. It goes back to one of the, if not the most influential text in certainly the Western world, which is the Bible. In Genesis, God sees that man is alone, so he creates a helpmeet for him. A woman. A helpmeet. What does that phrase mean? This is the King James translation. Well, if you look at it in the Hebrew original, helpmeet is ezer kenegdo, or help as opposition. In other words, the helpmeet translation, the meet part, M-E-E-T, is like an athletic meet, like a competition. Not helping and they meet together. It's help as opposition. And already then it was noticed that the ideal relationship is not one which is all smooth, conflict-free. It is one where there is some resistance. And it's this resistance that Gottman talked about is talking about in the 21st century that is so important, so critical for a healthy relationship. A beautiful enemy. Help as opposition. Help meet. Again, with a lot of positivity in the relationship as well.